Hello, all. It's a Friday. We're going to be going a little far afield here with training camp on training camp news, and we'll talk before we start the show about the Subway series. But I wanted to spread a little or share a little anecdote about me and my cooking exploits. I decided for the long weekend, and it's starting to get, even though it's like 80 degrees outside today, it has been a little cooler in the Buffalo area. It's starting to get in that time of the year where it's nice and warm in the mornings and afternoons, but then a little chilly in the evening. And I'm somebody who likes soup. I like, as something with a meal, I'll make a whole thing of soup, and I'll have a bowl, and then I'll put it away, and then I'll reheat it, and it almost gets better when you keep reheating it.
Soup gets better every time you reheat it.
So I make my own soup, and I went out and got a thing of chicken stock. And I appreciate over the years the fact that packages have become more safety conscious for tampering and things of that nature. And I bought this soup stock, and it has a plastic cap, and then it has the aluminum foil on the inside to know that it hasn't been tampered with. So I open this up, and the aluminum foil has been pierced. Now I'm in the middle of preparing my soup, so in the middle of preparation, I have to, shut everything off, go to the store, and get a whole new thing of soup, or a whole new thing of stock. And I did, and 25 minutes later, I get back to my apartment, and I repeat the process. I open it up, and it's pierced, and I'm like, "What the hell's going on?" Like, I'm thinking that the entire group of
the whole shipment got pierced.
Right, and then like the idiot that I am, I read the package, and it has a double security measure on the cap. One is like a plastic ring on the outside. The other is the aluminum foil, and it says when you twist the cap, it breaks the aluminum foil. So basically, I returned a perfectly
good one.
Perfectly good one. And just I wasted 25 minutes of my morning making soup that I didn't have to waste. So,
you're probably just good customer service, and they say probably, look, we got to make another batch of soup because another moron brought one back.
or do an either or. I mean, either you have the aluminum foil or you have the safety cap. Not both, and not one that breaks the aluminum foil. It makes no damn sense. But anyway, so anyway,
the old-fashioned way, and you had the bones, and you soaked those, then you wouldn't have needed the stock. But oh well.
Yeah, but I don't want to have to make my own chicken broth and take 6 hours to do that like my mom used to. It's like she started 9 o'clock in the morning, and then by 3 o'clock she had enough soup to make chicken noodle soup. It's like,
but she wanted to do that for her little boy.
No, she didn't. Believe me, she didn't. No, not a chance. Anyway, so Russ and I have a little friendly wager going on this weekend's Mets-Yankees series at Citi.
Ty probably wants to vomit, but it's all right.
Well, no, I was gonna fold Ty into this because the Red Sox do have something to do with it, because the Red Sox are in Toronto to play the Blue Jays, and if the Red Sox do their job, which is beat the Blue Jays beyond submission, and the Yankees win at least 2 or 3, then the next series, which is early next week between Toronto and New York at Rogers Center in Toronto, will be for first place in the division. But if the Red Sox maintain their subpar play throughout the year, then I think the Yankees are pretty much locked into the wild card. But what are your feelings on this weekend, Russ?
Well, I think the Mets are going to win 2 out of 3. I don't think, as much as the Red Sox would like to roll over, I don't think they're going to. But my dream matchup is still Yankees having to go into the Rogers Center, right? Mm-hmm. And have R.A. Dickey be on the mound and have him pitch like a 7-inning, 5-hit, 2-run game, and then me messaging or tweeting you saying, yeah, remember when you said he sucked like 2.5 months ago? He's been really good ever since, which he has been. And that would be fun for me.
Russ, I like my wings hot.
Uh-huh.
But I know that David Ortiz has hit his 500th career home run, Ty. And I know on a few radio shows I listen to, the debate is now ongoing, because we know that.
Well, there's no debate with him as far as if you think he partook in something. There's no debate in that.
No, not that debate, because I'm talking about the debate of whether he's a Hall of Famer. And honestly, he spent most of his career as a DH and as a bad first baseman. I mean, defensively, was really a bad first baseman. But he's won 3 World Series and has 500 career home runs. I mean, if the allegations are never proven, then Ty, I mean, do you think he's going to get in?
I mean, he's the greatest DH of all time, really. I mean, it's between Ortiz and Edgar Martinez, so I do think they should be in there. I feel this way about Clemens and Bonds. I think they should be in the Hall of Fame because I think they were going to be Hall of Famers before they did this.
Clemens, I would disagree. I think Bonds would be. Clemens, if you go look at his numbers and why people were booing him out of Fenway before he got to Toronto, which is when his trainer McNamee said that he started partaking in steroids. Wow. He had 3 or 4 really bad seasons, arm trouble, all of it, and then all of a sudden he was 21-8 and won the Cy Young, and that was out of nowhere. Bonds, right. I agree with you though. He was gonna be. You're right.
Yeah, and then the two players who seem to be tagged with that steroid moniker, even though there's never been proof that they took steroids. One is Jeff Bagwell, former Red Sox prospect who went to the Astros and had a great career, and the other is Mike Piazza. And it's apparently the main accusation against Mike Piazza is that he had acne on his back, and which is it's like, okay, either you prove it or you don't, but don't leave him out for hearsay. I mean, we know Rafael Palmeiro is a lying piece of crap, so that's why he'll never make the Hall of Fame. But there's no proof about Bagwell and there's no proof about Piazza. But I'm skeptical whether either one of them will get in, Russ.
I'm not skeptical about Piazza. I think at some point it's going to happen. I think these writers and they should be ashamed of themselves, have been sort of waiting to see if a report's going to come out. Mm-hmm. And now we're going to be going on 3 years next year, I think, right? Waiting for that. And since it hasn't, I think you have to put him in. He's the best hitting catcher ever, and then you worry about it if you're the Hall of Fame after the fact. This is not the writer's job. The writer's job is not to see what happens after the fact. Like their job is he worthy of being voted in? And he's worthy of being voted in. Bagwell, same thing. Hey, I don't care what kind of hearsay there is. If he's worthy of being voted in, then you vote him in, and then you worry about the rest later.
Yeah,
you can't ignore an entire generation of hitters, and that's what the steroid era is. I know it's frustrating for the voters and the traditionalists and the baseball purists, but at a certain point you have to acknowledge, what happened during that era and the players that were contributors and they did break records and be it a bit tarnished. I mean, you can't just brush that away like it never happened.
The problem with Ortiz is, and I was just re-looking it up, he was on that list, Mike. The same list I think that A-Rod was on, and the Times had it, and he said he didn't knowingly take it, and unfortunately the writers are tired of that, and so I think as well liked as he is, that's probably working against him. Even though he was a great clutch hitter, let's face it. I mean, he got huge clutch hits, but and that steroids wouldn't help that, but that is going to hurt him because when you go with I didn't knowingly do it, they get mad, and I don't blame them.
Yeah. All right, let's start the show. Let's go Russ, Ty, and myself. Hello, Hockey World. Today is Friday, September 18th, 2015.
I'm Russ Cohen. Let's go Mets.
I'm Ty Anderson.
I'm Michael Agello, and this is the Hockeybuzzcast on Hockeybuzz.com. And as you can tell, we're into the Subway series here, folks. But we're talking hockey today on a Friday, on Tie Day, and some training camp news, a lot of little things going on today. It was the first day on the ice for most NHL teams. Start off with the interesting note about Islanders prospect Joshua Ho-Sang, a very talented kid. I'm not sure if he would have made the team or would have had a good chance of making the team with somebody like Del Cole, who I think is probably going to make the Islanders as a 19-year-old. But he's a very talented kid, and he was sent back to the Niagara Ice Dogs of the OHL because he was late for the first day of training camp. And Russ, I'll give the Islanders credit. They, maybe it's a little bit of an overreaction, but there were a lot of questions about Hosang going into the draft about character issues.
Yep.
Got a lot of talent, as I said, but you can't be, if you think you're going to be late for the first day of training camp, stay up the entire night and be on time for the first day. But I can't believe that somebody would do that. What do you think?
Yeah, it's. I would say for anybody else, it's outrageous. I'm not shocked that it was Josh Hosang. I mean, I had heard about a lot of things, and I never really, report everything, right? Because you don't know what's true and what isn't. But there were certainly issues. Does he have talent? Absolutely. Is there a reason that he fell to the Islanders? Absolutely. And this is the reason. So now the Islanders are trying to send that message that may get through. I mean, look, I was a young guy, right? There were plenty of times where I was late to things, but I was never late to an interview because, I knew if I was late to an interview, there's no way in New York City I'm getting hired, right? Because there's 10 million other people. I don't think Josh Hosang has that kind of urgency in his mind. I think he figures if he shows up, everything's great. Now, I understand there's reports saying he was a model citizen during camp, rookie camp, and that's great. It doesn't matter. You have to be a model citizen every day, well, as far as showing up for work, and in order to get an NHL job when you currently don't have one, and you're trying to impress your employer. Islanders did the right thing. That definitely sends the right message.
Ty, do you think zero tolerance with young prospects is the right way to go? I mean, I personally do. I mean, if especially with a player who has had issues, and I can only link, and because of my focus on Toronto, I can only link Hosang and his issues with Nazem Kadri. Apparently, when he was suspended last year in Toronto, it wasn't the first time that he was late for practice. And it was a Sunday after a Saturday night game, and he was late. And I'm not going to go into the speculation of what had gone on that night, but you can put two and two together. So I mean, and he's a 24-year-old guy, and Hosang I think is 19 or 20 years old. Well, what do you think of the teams having that kind of zero tolerance policy?
I mean, it makes sense because if you let them get away with it at rookies, they're going to do it when they're 10-year vets too. So I look at this, and this is a good move for the Islanders. I mean, they knew the risk they had when they drafted this kid, and a lot of potential, high ceiling, but there are some concerns at the same time. So if they're trying to nip this in the bud while they can, good on them. This is the first time that Garth Snow and the Islanders have taken on a project. Everyone remembers Kavanaugh. They sort of went through some similar pains in a way with him in terms of what his work ethic was like and what they couldn't tolerate. So this is them getting to Hosang early. And hey, I mean I think that's the right punishment. If you show up late to the first day of training camp, you shouldn't have a chance at making the NHL team. That should be a sort of a given, especially if you're a rookie.
Yeah. Speaking of Kavanaugh, didn't he get invited to another training camp this year? I think it was the Rangers.
There's a rumor that he was going to be invited. I don't know if he formally got invited yet.
Okay. Well, I saw that I'd seen that on the news. I wasn't sure if it was definitive if he had or not, but these players, I mean, they're not going to get many shots at it. They're not going to get many chances, especially if they have an MO of being a little bit irresponsible. If
it's still a rumor.
It's still a rumor. Okay. I mean,
and I haven't seen anything online, so
Okay, yeah. So, all right. Wanted to move on to, and it's funny, Russ. I was prepared not to talk about Patrick Kane today, but the thing that we talked about yesterday, the one that I said was not exactly a good idea, or I said it was okay for him to show up to training camp, but it was going to be a distraction one way or the other. You and Ak and Dan were all saying that the press conference was horrid because he just read from a prepared statement and really couldn't say anything else. Well, he's making another press conference today, so he apparently is going to go in front of the press, or maybe has already gone in front of the press again today. So they didn't get the hint. Maybe they think that this is good to put him out there. But
All right, I'm going to tell you some things that I heard, right? So even just Philly radio, where they don't even talk about the Flyers enough, to be honest, Midday Show talked about it. Because they said, hey, did you see that press conference? We didn't believe a word he said. It looked horrible. He just kept looking down at the statement. Why in the world would they have him sitting up there and asking questions that he knows he can't answer? And all those things that we talked about. Right. It's the talk now. And so now they stoked it. Because now it's not going to quiet down for a while. Now, I also saw a quote where he said, hey, it was great to see all the cheers because, there's a lot of fans.
Yeah.
And they wanted to see the practice. And there's a lot of now harsh Twitter criticism for that. And so that wouldn't have been there, I don't think, as prevalent at least, if there wasn't a press conference yesterday to remind everybody about it. I still think there would have been some backlash, but I don't think it would have been as blatant as that.
The tie Russ was going to bring up, or Russ just brought up what I was going to bring up regarding the fact that he stepped on the ice and he was cheered by Blackhawks fans, which, you know what, okay, I can understand Blackhawks fans being supportive of their players, but if this is proven out to be what the people think it is, that's not a visual and a thing that I think the NHL is going to be very happy with.
Yeah, I mean, you think of last September when Ray Rice returned to the Ravens, and he comes out to a field of a standing ovation, and you kind of watch that going, ooh, I don't know if you should be doing that, because you didn't have all the facts at the time, but we basically sort of had a feeling that something may have happened, and sure enough, the video came out shortly after that. But again, it was just like it's very weird when you see these sort of situations. I personally, I would let him, if I were the Blackhawks, I would have let him come to camp. I don't know if I would have put him on the ice personally, just because you have a lot going on with that team right now as is. You have a lot of guys that are there trying to make the team on tryouts. They don't have a lot of cap space. They need to have a strong camp because this is going to be a skeleton crew this year for the Blackhawks. So I don't think you need this distraction right off the bat. And you see the looks during the press conference. You see like the grins and sort of like the facial expressions, and you walk away from that going, that was a bad idea. And that's what I felt about that yesterday, and I still feel that way today. I understand that he wants to be with the team. The team wants him around. Duncan Keith has talked about that this group has been through a lot together. But I don't know if he should be there right now, just based on the distraction that it will and already has brought to the table.
And the thing is that there was a lot of changeover with this team last summer. Over the summer. I mean, a lot of these players were not part of that championship team, so their introduction to the Blackhawks and Blackhawks training camp is this hubbub about Patrick Kane and all this, all these accusations and everything that's going on, and that can't be settling for guys like, Marco Dano and Artem Anisimov and other players. So yeah, it's an uncomfortable situation, and until things are resolved, it's not going to be comfortable. Also with the Hawks, we mentioned yesterday that Brent Seabrook had been named an alternate captain for the team, which was curious because he's entering the last year of his contract. There were some reports yesterday that indicated that the Hawks and Seabrook are working on an extension. Russ, if he gets extended, and looking up while we're talking here how old he is, I think he's 29 or 30.
Yeah, that's about right.
Yeah. I would think it would probably be a 5 or 6 year extension. I'm just wondering what his number is going to come up with, because Duncan Keith is making 5.5 on that long-term deal. I can't see him making much more than that. Otherwise, I think optically it's not the greatest thing, because if Keith, who's widely regarded as one of the best defensemen in the league, is making 5.5 and Seabrook is making 7 or 7.5, it just isn't, in a way, it's not fair.
I think they'll give him something like 5.25 over 5 years, maybe with an option for a 6th. I think they'll do something like that, and I think Seabrook will take it. He always seemed like a guy that does really want to stay there, and I think that's why he's negotiating now, and so I see that coming to a good resolution. I do want to mention one positive thing also about the Hawks camp is Scotty Bowman actually tweeted. He did it in all caps, but I give him credit.
I saw that.
And he says it's his 82nd birthday and he's at his 45th training camp. He is the greatest guy in the world. I've chatted with him when the Flyers had lost the Stanley Cup and the Blackhawks won, I was on the ice next to him, and I was interviewing him, just chatting with him, but he knew I was a reporter. And then we took a minute to pause because Jonathan Taves skated by with the cup. He was like, I have a picture of that on my Facebook, and he was like an inch from us, and he just, told me so many interesting things, and just such a nice guy. Anytime he's around, he's always willing to talk. So 45 training camp's good for him, man.
Yeah, and where is the only place that Scotty Bowman didn't get to a Stanley Cup final?
Yeah, well,
Right here. Ty Seabrook, if he takes what Russ had just said, say a little bit under what Keith is making, I think he's going to probably have to get a longer deal, like 7-8 years. So at the end of it, if they buy him off, if they make a buyout at the end of the deal when he's 36 or 37 and can't play anymore, and then he gets a lump sum. I mean, they'll take a cap hit, but they're, if it's a shorter deal, I think he's going to want more money.
Yeah, I mean, it makes sense, right? Because he's around 30. This would be his chance for one big payday, and it's not going to come when he's 35 years old, if he takes a 5-year deal for $5 million a year. So it's a weird situation. I think at the same time he likes being a Blackhawk. I think all those guys, part of that core. I mean, listen, if you win 3 Stanley Cups, of course you're going to like being where you are. I mean, that just makes sense. But I think, Seabrook and Keith in particular, I mean, those guys, they just seem to have such a good feel for one another, and they've gone through a lot. And I do think that, so he has to battle this sense of the loyalty versus your big payday, because you can't, if you're broke when you're 50, not that it's easy to blow through millions, but we've seen it before. If you're broke when you're 50, I mean, does it really matter that you had that loyalty to the Blackhawks when you were 29 years old? So I think that's something that you have to sort of weigh out, and you have to see what's more important to you and your family. Because I look at this, and I mean, if he hit the market, he'll get 6 or 7 easily from a team. I know that it seems, he's a supporting cast member in Chicago and things of that nature, but there is a premium on defense. Teams are always looking for a number 1 or a number 2. So maybe he is a number 1 on a mediocre team, and that team willing to pay him $7 million a season, whereas the Blackhawks simply can't do that. So it's a huge thing that he has to weigh out.
He's a top-paying defenseman.
Is he really? Yeah, but is he really going to be hurt if he gets 6 years, like 32.5, 33 million, and maybe they tinker with it where the first 3 years he's making 6, 6.5, and then it starts going down. So at least he could say, "Hey, I'm making more." And they'll fool around with it that way. I think to satisfy.
They'll front load it, Russ. I mean, if as much as they can. I mean, he could make. If it's a 6-year deal, he could make as much as $9 or $9.5 million, and then it just goes down.
And that's what I'm saying. They'll fool around with it, whatever amount they're able to, and I think it'll be fine. I really do think that'll be the way it's going to go. I don't think once you're in that $30 million range that he'll go broke. He's not like he doesn't strike me as a guy who lives high on the hog. Let's put it that way. He's pretty much the same guy that I remember talking to pre-draft, at the draft, and in those kinds of situations. So I think they'll be okay with him.
Moving on to Montreal, the Canadiens have named Max Pacioretty their team captain. Now, they didn't have a team captain last year after Brian Giunta had moved on to the Buffalo Sabres.
Boy, all these American captains, it's got to be rubbing some of them the wrong way, man.
Well, I was going to mention that because, I mean, I know that one of the candidates, obvious candidates, was PK Subban, who wanted the job, and I mean, not to say that I think he gave $10 million to a Montreal hospital to ingratiate himself to the Canadiens to get. Yeah, I think that was a very selfless act and didn't have anything to do with the captaincy. But I know that he wanted it, but this was a vote of the team, and they named Pacioretty the captain. And I don't know if he speaks French. I'm sure that if he does, it's probably broken. But then that's a very important part of being captain. But over the last few,
so's winning.
What's that?
So's winning.
So is winning, yes. And over the last, I don't believe Saku Koivu spoke French fluently. I know that Giunta didn't, but he was a leader and a good player for a time. And maybe finally the precedent has been set that you don't have to be a French speaker to be captain of the Habs.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I think they're finally getting past that. I remember all the hate when an American corporation owned the Habs for a while. Remember that? That was like heresy. I think things have changed now to the point where they're okay with it. I think they realize, hey, 1993 is a long time ago, and winning is more important.
Yeah, and Ty, you and I both get a chance to see the Habs probably more often than we really wish to. Pacioretty is, he's not the best player on that team because that's Carey Price, but it's him or Subban, and normally nowadays the guy who's the captain is one of the best players.
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. I look at Max Pacioretty's career, sort of how it's taken flight here these past few years, and he has been a leader for Montreal. Maybe he's not the vocal, scream-in-your-face type of leader, but when the Canadiens need a big goal, it's usually Max Pacioretty that's scoring it or his line that's producing the points. So that's a big thing for Montreal, and I think that his style is a bit more, I don't want to say professional, than PK, whereas PK will take bad penalties. He'll get involved in sort of the stuff that he just doesn't need to do as a talented player with the diving, with the embellishment, things of that nature. So I don't know if necessarily you want your captain to be that guy. So I think that naturally Pacioretty seemed like a better fit for that role. But yeah, I mean, at this point, they'll just take the best player, whoever it is. Doesn't matter if he speaks, Finnish or English or French or anything. So I think that, that's a big step for Montreal is naming a captain because when teams don't have captains, they just roll this three alternate sort of system. It just feels a bit, mix and match. Doesn't seem like there's ever any continuity there in terms of, who's leading the charge, who's leading the way. It seems like it's a leader by committee. So for Montreal to finally have a guy that you can see as the long-term captain of this team is just a great step for the Canadiens.
One humorous note here. Apparently, GM Marc Bergevin attempted to go to Pacioretty's home to inform him of the news this morning, or maybe yesterday. They didn't say a time. And apparently, Bergevin went to the wrong address and called Pacioretty on his phone and said, "Open your front door." And when Pacioretty opened the front door, there was no Marc Bergevin there. So that's pretty funny. Moving on to the Buffalo Sabres, they're opening up. Obviously, they opened up their training camp on Friday. Jack Eichel apparently will play most of the season, or at least to start the season, with housemate Matt Moulson. Russ, I think this makes all the sense in the world because Matt Moulson is a guy who goes to the front of the net, who's one of those, he's a goal hound. He picks up the garbage and converts it into goals. He did that with Tavares, with the Islanders. I think that's a pretty good fit for the Sabres to put Eichel.
Yeah, Moulson's a good guy that way, on and off the ice, so that makes sense. It might revive his career a bit. They need to do that with the money they spent on Moulson because they spent way too much money on Matt Moulson. So this is a way they could sort of recoup that. If they don't get anything out of Matt Moulson, then they're going to have a problem. Because if you can't get anything with Eichel on your line, then that's going to be the end of the line for Matt Moulson. So it's also going to be a little bit of pressure for him, believe it or not.
Mm-hmm. But I know that Ty, Evander Kane has made comments leading into this season that he is going to score between 40 and 50 goals. Don't hesitate from putting any pressure on yourself there, Evander. I understand that players have confidence in their abilities, and after the situation that went on in Winnipeg, he wants to move on and he wants to make a big splash. But his mouth is writing checks that his body can't cash. Oh,
absolutely. How about you score 35 first, before you start making 50? So I think that's it's a big leap. Obviously there is confidence rolling throughout the Sabres right now. I think they feel like they have the right sort of path to becoming an NHL playoff team. Going back to Matt Moulson, playing with Tavares, you saw how potent this guy could be around the front of the net. Maybe Eichel can get that going again. But yeah, there's a lot of confidence with the Sabres team right now, and you'd almost wish for the season to start before you start doing that. But hey, good on them. I do think that they're in a good situation in the sense that I don't think the Eastern Conference, specifically the Atlantic Division, is any good for the most part. So I think they can compete. I don't know if they're going to be scoring 40 goals and competing this year, but I mean, we'll see. But again, I mean, Evander Kane, I just think is a player that he's happy to be out of Winnipeg, and he's happy to be in a city where they welcomed him, and they're definitely allowing his personality to show. That's something that seemed to always be in question in Winnipeg. So, maybe he's just feeling it right now, and he knows that this is a different situation, different environment, and they'll let him be that sort of player. And hey, if it builds some confidence for him, good on him.
The Sabres are going to be significantly better, Russ. I mean, I think they're, they may challenge for 8th place, but they still have a lot of holes. You got to find out whether Robin Lehner can be the #1 goaltender and not get injured. They added Cody Franz into their defense. Their defense, I think, is okay, but I don't think.
Remember when they added Ehrhoff? We heard the same thing. Hey, Ehrhoff's going to cure this, and he didn't, and so there's no guarantee Franzen does either.
Right. But, they do have a good young crop of forwards, but I don't think that it can be rushed. And, they may struggle at the beginning of the year getting started. There are a lot of pieces that are coming together. And, you can't put a lot of pressure on Eichel right off the bat. I mean, he is an 18-year-old. He's a very talented 18-year-old. But he still is 18 years old, and if he struggles early, I mean that's understandable. So, and we don't know.
I think that's the mistake that Evander Kane made here is that he sees Jack Eichel coming in, and he wants to sort of be the best leader on this team, the best player on this team, and to me, he should just let his play do the talking because I just think it's an outlandish statement. I mean, if you go back and look at how many guys score 40 and 50, it's a small list, and even a guy like Rick Nash can't do it every year. So it's a little bit of crazy talk, and if I were his coach, I would have said something to him right after that press conference, like, hey, nice that you said that. Let's keep that on the back burner now because, let's pump the brakes and let's see what you can do. Because, again, I'm not sold that he's going to work in that environment. I'm not. I mean, they are a young team. They have some veterans. But, again, let's see how he works with them. Because if he doesn't work well with them, then the problem's going to be him. And so hopefully he's learned from that.
Sticking with the Atlantic Division here, the Ottawa Senators owner Eugene Melnyk announced the hiring of Daniel Alfredsson as a senior advisor of hockey operations. Ty, they have a delicate situation right now with Brian Murray. I know that Brian Murray is, he's feeling better. He's still, he's still active. He's still the GM of the team, and he's still, involved in day-to-day operations. But I'm wondering with this news whether, Daniel Alfredsson is being brought in, to eventually replace Brian Murray in maybe a couple years. They said that Alfredsson had aspirations of being in management, and maybe this is sort of like, be around, learn how to operate the team, and eventually take over. What do you think?
Yeah, I've been in Boston. I saw this with Cam Neely. Cam Neely came in as an advisor, then a vice president, and then the president. Now basically he runs the team. So, and it took a while though. You needed to understand how the game was sort of run from a financial standpoint, and prospects and management, things of that nature. So, and I mean, this is a good situation. I think Brian Murray has been a hell of a GM in his career. So to sort of have him guiding you when he can, I think will be a huge factor for the Alfredsson's development as a front office executive, because the Senators lost out on Tim Murray when he went to Buffalo, and so this is a situation now where it's you need to find that next guy because it's a really weird situation, and a lot of things can happen really quickly, as we know, and then you don't want to be in a situation where you simply don't have a GM or you simply don't have a face of the front office, which is very important for any player or on the roster, or any player that wants to come to the roster via trade or free agency. So this is a big step for Alfredsson and the Sens. I think you kind of saw this coming eventually. Once the bridge was sort of mended between the two, between the Sens and Alfredsson after his departure, I thought that this was only a matter of time before he stepped into some sort of role with the team. So it's happening really quickly, and but again, I mean, I think having Murray, sort of guide you into this realm is a huge bonus.
Yeah, there's no question. I mean, I think it's a feel-good moment. Fans will love it. Him being around, that'll be a nice thing for the players. Well-respected guy. Mike, I see this great quote from Dustin Bufflin on Twitter. Have you seen it?
I have not.
Asked him whether he wants to stay with the Jets. He's like, yeah, I mean, we've got beautiful lakes and stuff around here. Everything's great. I don't know how to take that. I really don't know how to take that.
That's that's like I'm not gonna say anything negative, but I'm gone. That's what it's.
I mean, Ty, do you believe that? That's my question. I'm not sure I believe that.
Well, this is the same guy that had a drunk while operating a boat charge, right? That's this Dustin Bufflin. I don't know. Maybe. I mean, that's the guy that I think if he's smart, he'll. I don't know what he'll do. I'm trying to picture what he should do. I have no idea because he can make a lot of money. He could make a lot of money, but
the question is whether Winnipeg will pony up, whether they will pay what he can get on the open market or come close. If they do, then I think he'll stay. If they try to get that hometown discount, I think he's gone. And they have to. And we've said this a few times. They have to find this out pretty quickly. They have to find this out, maybe before the regular season starts, because then they can.
Well, that quote didn't tell us, hey, we're negotiating. Hey, I expect to sign. Hey, I want to sign.
Yeah.
He talked about the Great Lakes and so everything's great. I
mean, to me,
there's more to it than that.
Yeah, to me, it's like that's setting up. If they're not close, we're not hearing, like you just said, we're not hearing the news in Winnipeg that we're hearing out of Chicago that they're near an agreement. If you're not hearing that and they're not negotiating, then they're gonna trade him before the deadline because they cannot. Especially an organization like Winnipeg, and they're one of the deepest organizations in terms of prospects. They have a lot of young kids that are exciting players, Ehlers and Patan and Morrissey, as we've talked about a few times.
Yeah. They need guys at the NHL level for Buffalo.
Right, exactly, and they have to get guys who are locked up on contracts for Buffalo because they can't get free agents in Winnipeg. It's a reality, unfortunately, but unless we'll see.
I got taken by stormtroopers. Look, he's gone.
Oh well, he'll be coming.
No, I'm here. I'm still here.
he's inside the jail on the Death Star. Are you in the Death Star, Ty?
Yeah, I am. I've been captured. It's a real bad time at the moment. No.
Find Princess Leia if you can.
You gotta look at too with when it comes to Winnipeg. You have to look at what happened last year is that they moved on from Evander Kane because they felt that there was a rift between he and Dustin Bufflin. And you can't lose both those guys because they're both impact players. Mm-hmm. So I think you almost have to pony up the money. But at the same time, I think Winnipeg has a great sort of prospect pool coming into the mix here. So you can't overpay everybody because then you can't keep those guys. So I think they got to figure out Andrew Ladd first and then Bufflin. But both these guys, it's like a 1A and 1B sort of situation for the Jets.
Well, one thing is, I think they have to sign Ladd, and I think Ladd will be a little more economical than Bufflin would be because Bufflin's a defenseman, and he's been making decent money, $5.2 million on the last contract, but with the lack of quality defensemen that get to free agency, he can make over $7 million. So if he gets close to $7 million on a deal, then that Winnipeg offers him, then I think he'll be signed. But they have to sign Scheifele on a bridge deal. They have to lock up some of their players, that are UFAs and RFAs, and maybe they choose to use that money to sign those players rather than spend $7 million on Buffalo. And the funny thing is, Russ, this situation, and I was going to talk about this, but not too long because we're going to be talking about it until he signs that contract. This is very similar to the Stamkos situation, but the difference is that Stamkos has a no move. So if Steve Yzerman wanted to trade Stamkos, if he couldn't sign him to a contract, he can't unless Stamkos wants to go somewhere. Stamkos wants to go win a Stanley Cup, and he knows he's not going to sign in Tampa. He could waive the no-move clause to go to Anaheim or something like that. But, if he wants to win a Stanley Cup in Tampa where he's been since he was 18 years old, they can't trade him, and then he can go to free agency if he wants next July and either get Tampa to sign him for, $11 or $12 million or go to some other team that will be willing to pay that price.
Yeah. Now, is this Ty or is this a hologram?
No, this is me. This is me. I got attacked by, not attacked, but the cat is jumping all over the chair. I couldn't focus on anything. I had to get him out of here, and he's back now. So it's a good chance for me to get captured by the stormtroopers.
Attack of the Killer Cat.
Honestly.
Now, Ty, to talk about your Bruins for a minute. So, your Bruins, your 3 first-rounders came up as a discussion point with Ron Hextall at rookie camp. Did you see any of those quotes?
I did not. No.
All right, so I'll paraphrase. He was basically saying, hey, look, it's not a great thing. But he said, look, I mean, things can happen with young players, and, you know, it's not what you expect, but they can certainly still become great players and everything. But, you know, he said it wasn't a great thing, but he also said about his club that everybody scored better this time than they did last time. That's the only thing he would give us on scores. So when you hear something like that, that does have to make you think, yeah, there's a little bit of an issue, at least a small issue.
Yeah, we you know, like we talked about last week, I think it's a huge issue. I don't think it's going to happen again. It's probably similar to how I feel about Josh Hosang and with the Islanders. I don't know if he'll be late again, you know, to the first day of camp, if that means he'll never come back. So, you know, I can assure you that the Bruins have probably whipped these guys into shape here these past few days, past few weeks even, and just told them what's on the line here and what's on the line if you don't get in shape, because or if you don't pass these tests, because the Bruins will not carry any of these guys if they do not pass conditioning tests, if they do not pass fitness tests, if they don't meet what they consider their standards and their goals. So that's a big thing. Don't get me wrong, but I think that it's, in a way, it's almost beneficial for them to go through this now with this new management team to learn, hey, this is not acceptable. This is not going to happen under our watch, and go from there. So if it happens again, that's when the red flags really start to come out, I think, in my opinion anyways.
Sure.
But, I mean, management, it seems like they are on top of this right now just because this is embarrassing for them. I mean, some of these guys, they took above other assets that, you know, you've read really positive reviews on. So for that to happen, and then for them to fail these conditioning tests, it's almost like a slap in the face to management for taking these guys. Some of them are reaches, you'd say. So I don't think it's going to happen again.
Now, what about the quote I saw from camp that a lot of guys are old souls? I don't know, like, I know that was meant as a positive thing, but again, I think that's sort of a, you know, like I saw Bergeron was talking about, hey, there's got to be, you know, good locker room and good continuity, and for the most part, the Bruins always have that. But I think when you start to talk about all those other things, I do kind of question whether they feel like they're a talented enough group. They won't tell you that, but I do kind of feel like that's almost like, let's make up for the non-talent with this, and hopefully it works out.
Yeah, I mean, cliches and everything in between. Their dogs, they'll fight it all out. You know, it's just like at a certain point you have to look at this roster and sort of question whether or not it's capable of competing. Right. I look at this team right now, and what they need above everything else is a strong camp, because you have a lot of guys that are unproven, especially on the back end here. You have a lot of players, whether it's Zach Trotman or Torrey Krug's going to be a top 4 defenseman in the series. Never really had that role before. Then you go down the line. Colin Miller, Joe Morrow. It goes on. Matt Irwin has never really been a steady point producer, but the Bruins think he could be. So I think that this is a different camp, and you need to have a strong camp and really sort of gel as a unit right off the bat. And I don't know if they have the skill set and the scheduling for that to happen, because this is, camp opened, on ice opened today. Their first game is on Sunday, and they have one on Tuesday and Thursday. I mean, this is going to start really quickly for them, so they need to have a strong start. They need to find momentum and gel off the bat, and I just don't know if they have the bodies on the back end and up front to make that happen.
Couple humorous things out of the Leaf world. Lou Lamoriello, Russ, is making his presence felt. Apparently, the Leafs broadcasting crew of Joe Bowen and Jim Ralph, who have broadcast with the team for years, they're the radio guys, and they have traveled with the team for years, and it's been policy for Lou in New Jersey that the broadcasting crews do not travel with the teams, so they will not be traveling with the Leafs. And apparently there's also, and it hasn't been an edict that has been talked about in the press, but Lou is somebody who likes his players, like he's a Yankee fan, Russ, so he likes his players clean shaven, like George Steinbrenner.
He was a part of that whole Yankee MSG thing. Remember that?
Yeah, so I don't recall seeing any Maple Leaf player at the press conference at the media event yesterday with facial hair. So
well, you don't have to worry about a playoff beard, right? So I mean,
yeah, that's true. It's gonna be interesting to see how we've already seen one trade. Although I think we said yesterday, and I'll reiterate it. On one hand, Lou is saying, I haven't made evaluations on players, and then they trade 5 players from their in the depth of their minor league, which leads me to believe that these were players that were evaluated by Kyle Dubas and Mark Hunter, and that they were, quote, expendable, and that's why they were traded. I don't think Lou was the determining factor in this.
I agree.
Yeah. So, and
Lou's grip is strong, and we all knew it would be.
Say that again. I'm sorry.
Lou's grip is strong already in the Leafs, and we knew it would be.
Yeah, because Shanahan is giving him the control. Shanahan is the overall ruler of this organization.
Right.
But Lou is going to have a say. He respects him. It's the guy who drafted him in 1987.
Yep.
He used him as a resource in terms of asking questions about. He's essentially been his consigliere, for lack of a better term. And now he's his general manager, and Lou is as good as you can get, but he runs things a certain way. So I think that's what's going to be happening. But the interesting thing is, Ty, there's Mike Babcock in his remarks yesterday. He didn't guarantee anybody anything. He didn't say that Jonathan Bernier is going to be the number 1 goaltender. He says they're going to have to fight for playing time. He didn't want to even review last season's video. He wants to determine what is going on with this team right now and not review the past, which was last year was pretty ugly. So this is essentially right now Babcock saying we're starting fresh. We're going to step on the ice in Nova Scotia this weekend, and I'm going to start determining whether these players are good or are bad based on what I'm seeing and not what I have seen the last few years.
Yeah, I think it's hilarious. He doesn't want to watch any footage. Does anybody in Toronto want to watch footage of last season? So I look at this. Honestly, Babcock, that's this way you got to do it with this team because there are too many sort of variables at play here. Is Nazem Kadri going to be number 1 center? Can James Van Riemsdyk, score 35 goals on that top line? What can happen for this team this year? So another cat here, but I think that's a big. These are unknowns right now for Mike Babcock, and I think he's approaching it the way you have to. This team is rebuilding. We all know that, but he needs to find out what he has, and he's not going to find that out by looking on the past. He needs to focus on the future because that's what this whole thing is about for the Leafs. It's about the future. It's not about the past. So this makes sense. This is a veteran coaching move, and this is what you sort of expect out of a guy like Mike Babcock.
Yeah, I got some breaking news if you want it.
Go for it.
Grant Klitzum failed his physical, so it doesn't look like he's going to be playing for the Jets this year.
Wow.
That just came in. That's now Now they probably weren't expecting that.
Yeah, well, if there are any free agent defensemen who could come in on a PTO, maybe.
Or one of the kids now gets that opportunity.
Does Morrissey get a chance?
Yeah, I think he's really close. I think Josh Morrissey is really close. So he might get the chance.
Yeah.
There's no shortage of guys out there, too, right now in terms of looking for work. There are still quite a few defensemen out there that we haven't heard of. They don't have guaranteed contracts. They don't have even PTOs right now. So we'll see.
I saw an image. This will make a lot of Ranger fans sad, but who knew Carl Hagelin surfed? Well, we know now.
When you're in California, you do what Californians do.
Well, we know now.
One little tidbit, and I shared this with you yesterday when I heard the news. Craig Button from TSN had reported a curious signing to the Maple Leafs scouting staff. His name was Jim Vesey Sr. Now, Jim Vesey Sr. is the dad of Nolan Vesey, who was a Maple Leaf draft pick in 2014, who plays for the University of Maine. He was a late-round pick and had a pretty good year in his freshman year. But more importantly, he is the dad. Nolan's older brother is Jimmy Vesey Jr., who plays for Harvard University and is probably one of the leading contenders for the Hobey Baker this upcoming season. Russ, this smells of Mike Riley, like a Mike Riley situation, because he didn't sign with Nashville after his junior year. He went back for his senior year. If he doesn't sign with Nashville, he becomes a UFA, like Kevin Hayes did, like Mike Riley did, like Zach Hyman was threatening to do before he got traded to Toronto. And if he goes UFA, I think the team that has his dad as an employee and his brother as a draftee would have a bit of an advantage.
Yeah, I mean, he's a heck of a prospect, as Ty knows. He plays in that area. I mean, he's really a guy who's big, who's very skilled, a good goal scorer, very good skater. His skating's gotten better every year. Mm-hmm. You know, he's what Nashville needs long term, but, you know, again, Nashville's not known for great offensive output, and maybe, you know, a guy like Vesey sort of looked at that and said, it's not to my liking. We won't know that for a while, but it certainly does. The possibility definitely exists.
Yeah, and with a team in a transition and a rebuild, I mean, I think he would, after his senior year, would probably step into the lineup with Nashville. I don't think there was probably any doubt that he would, but I think there's absolutely no doubt that if he goes free agent anywhere he goes, he's going to sign with a team that is going to guarantee him you'll be on our roster next October. So I think that'll be motivation. But Ty, I mean, that's one advantage that the Maple Leafs have. I mean, they, finally, if they, to their advantage, flex their influence and their financial muscles. I mean, with a free agent like a potential free agent like Vesey, they're locked into an entry level deal. So the most they can pay him is $925,000, but they can give him bonuses like a first round pick. And, some teams might not be willing to do that, but a team like Toronto would be.
Yeah, absolutely. And you look at, Vesey was an unbelievable player for Harvard last year. He was the guy to watch when you watch the Crimson play. And I think that was a big thing for him. Obviously, his stock just soared, really, at the end of the year. I liked him a lot. But again, this is a situation where a team like Toronto, an original six team, they have this cachet that you'd like to come to Toronto, especially if you see some positives in the rebuilding process, and if your father and everyone else in the family is involved with the team. Obviously, there's a leg up there as well, but it's tough. It's tough when you're a team like a Phoenix or a Nashville that can't sign these guys when they hit the open, when they need a contract, and you can't be the team that provides it. Yeah, and it's not the first. It's not the first time you've seen a southern market team struggle with this. So I think it's frustrating for them, because I think if you look at Nashville's long-term view, you could see Vesey sliding in there very easily. Like you said, Mike, absolutely no doubt. So it's a tough sell. I think it's a tough pill for Nashville to swallow as well if he does indeed decide to go to Toronto. But it would make all the sense in the world, like you said, with the Mike Riley sort of esque signing there.
Okay, guys, great show. Glad that we got the training camps open. We're going to probably start doing some season previews of teams in the next week or so. Eck will be back on Monday along with Kevin Allen, and we'll have some other people. I'll check with Russ to see if he's back on Monday. But we'll have our usual panel of greatness. For Ty Anderson, for Russ Cohen, I'm Michael Agello of HockeyBuzz.com. Remember, without the buzz, it's just hockey, and go Yankees.
Go Mets.